I have learned something after more than 40 years in a courtroom. The loudest person is almost never the strongest one, and the richest person is almost never ready for the truth. So tell me this before we go any further. Have you ever seen someone walk into court so full of pride that she thought even standing up was beneath her? Stay with me because this day began with a chair that did not move and ended with a whole room in shock. Most people think court is about tickets, fines, and paperwork, but that is not what I see when I look down from the bench. I see fear, I see pain, I see people on the worst day of their month, and sometimes the worst day of their life. I also see something else. I see the mask people wear when they believe money can save them from shame. Some wear old jackets and bring their humility with them. Others wear diamonds and bring their ego. On the morning of April 6, 2026, in my courtroom in Providence, one woman brought enough ego for the whole building. Her name was Bianca Sterling Vale. She was 31 years old, famous online, heir to a private equity empire, and worth more money than most people in that room would see in 100 lifetimes. Before she even stepped inside, my court officer told me she had parked a white Lamborghini Revuelto across two spaces near the handicapped curb. The engine was still ticking hot. The doors looked like wings. It was the kind of car that announces itself before the driver even speaks. Then Bianca walked in. Cream-colored Louboutin heels, a gray Hermès Birkin bag tucked under one arm, Cartier bracelet, Patek Philippe watch, big black Chanel sunglasses, still on inside the courtroom. She had a young assistant behind her carrying a silver MacBook and a garment bag. She smelled like expensive perfume and impatience. She did not walk in like a citizen coming before a judge. She walked in like she was late for a magazine cover shoot and all of us were in her way. But the person sitting across from her was not there for show. Her name was Maria Santos, 44 years old, night shift nurse, Army veteran, single mother of two. She sat in the second row with a paper folder in her lap and both hands wrapped around it like it was the only thing holding her together. She still had pale blue scrubs on under a black sweater because she had come straight from work. Her shoes were white nursing clogs, old and cracked near the toes. Her face looked tired in the deep way that only comes from years of putting other people first. Maria had served as an Army medic in Iraq from 2005 to 2010. Shrapnel damage in her left knee still gave her pain when the weather turned cold. After the military, she became a nurse. She worked nights on the cardiac floor. She was also raising her 12-year-old son, Leo, who had cystic fibrosis, and her 8-year-old daughter, Elena. Her father lived with them too, a retired machinist who needed dialysis twice a week. Maria's life was one long list of duties, and yet when she came into court, she stood straight, spoke softly, and treated everyone with respect. The case came from the night of March 14th at 10:47 p.m. outside Broad Street Pharmacy. Maria had just gotten off a 12-hour shift and stopped to pick up Leo's breathing medication before heading home. She parked her 2009 Toyota Corolla in a legal 15-minute pharmacy space. She ran inside. She picked up albuterol vials, saline solution, and a replacement nebulizer mask because Leo's old one had cracked that morning. When she came back out 3 minutes later, Bianca's Lamborghini was angled behind her car, music blasting, hazard lights flashing, and the engine revving like the street was a racetrack. According to Officer Daniel O'Keefe, badge number 271, the Lamborghini jerked backward, then shot forward and slammed into the rear of Maria's Corolla at about 27 miles an hour. The trunk folded in, the taillight shattered. Maria's pharmacy bag flew from her hands and split open on the wet ground. One vial cracked, another rolled into the gutter. Maria shouted, "Please stop, my son needs that medicine." Bianca stepped out, looked at the crushed Corolla, looked at Maria, and laughed. Not a nervous laugh, not an embarrassed laugh, a mean laugh. Then she said, loud enough for two witnesses to hear, "Why do people park junk next to real cars?" Maria bent down to gather the medicine with shaking hands. Bianca pulled out cash and tossed $200 bills toward her. One landed in a puddle, the other hit Maria's shoe. At 10:53 p.m., Officer O'Keefe arrived and blocked the Lamborghini before Bianca could leave. Maria was already crying by then, not because of the damage to the car, but because her son's treatment was due at 11:30 and she did not know how she would replace the broken medication. When the clerk called the case that morning, everyone in the courtroom stood, everyone except Bianca Vale. She stayed seated with one leg crossed over the other, phone in hand, sunglasses still on, like she was waiting for room service. I took my seat and watched her for a second. I do not ask for worship in my courtroom. I do not need people to fear me, but I do require respect for the process. So I said very calmly, "Ms. Vale, please stand." She did not move. I said it again. "Ms. Vale, stand up, please." She slowly removed one AirPod, looked at me, and said, "I heard you. I just don't stand for traffic court." The room went quiet in a way you can feel in your chest. I leaned forward and said, "In this courtroom, everyone stands." She smiled a small, crooked smile and said, "No disrespect, Judge, but I run companies worth hundreds of millions. I paid more in taxes last year than this entire building is worth, so if this is some old-school respect ritual, I'll pass." That kind of sentence tells you everything about a person before the evidence even begins. I looked at her and said, "Money may buy comfort, Ms. Vale. It does not buy rank in here. Stand." This time she rose, but she did it slowly and with an eye roll, like she was doing me a favor, and right there I knew this case was not going to stay small. Before I tell you how much worse it got, do me a favor and keep listening, because I promise you this story does not end the way proud people think it will. The city prosecutor, Alan Green, read the charges: leaving the scene of a property damage collision, improper backing, failure to produce valid proof of insurance, disorderly conduct, and then, because of what had already happened in the room, contempt. Bianca laughed softly at that last word like it amused her. Her first move was simple. She lied. She said she had not been driving. She claimed her driver had been behind the wheel. Then she looked at Maria and said, "This woman is trying to turn a parking lot scratch into a life tragedy." Maria lowered her eyes and held the folder tighter. Officer O'Keefe testified first. He was calm and exact. He said when he arrived, Bianca was in the driver's seat. He asked for her license, registration, and insurance. She handed him a black American Express Centurion card and said, "Can't I just pay whatever this is right now?" When he asked again for her license, she said, "I don't carry plastic unless I'm flying private." I have heard arrogance in many forms, but that one took effort. Then the prosecutor played the body cam. There she was on screen, clear as day, stepping out of the driver's side of the Lamborghini in those same cream heels. Maria was on camera too, holding the ripped pharmacy bag and saying, "Officer, my son needs this tonight." And in the background, Bianca's voice cut through the rain. Always a sob story. That sentence changed the air in the room. The next witness was Samir Patel, the pharmacist working that night. 56 years old, thin glasses, quiet man. He said he saw Bianca filming herself in selfie mode before the crash. He heard Maria yell for her to stop. He heard the impact. Then he saw Bianca's assistant hand Maria a paper after the collision. The prosecutor handed it up. It was a one-page non-disclosure agreement from Vail Brand Holdings. If Maria accepted $500, she agreed not to post, report, or discuss the incident with media or online. I looked at Bianca. "Your company carries crash hush forms?" She shrugged. "My staff handles problems fast." "No," I said, "they bury them fast." Maria testified next, and she did not try to make herself sound brave. That is how I knew she was. She simply told the truth. She said she had stayed late at the hospital because an older patient had gone into distress during shift change. She said she only stopped at the pharmacy because Leo's breathing treatment could not wait until morning. She said when the bag broke open on the pavement, she was not thinking about her car. She was thinking about her son trying to sleep while fighting for air. Then she looked at me and said, "Your Honor," she looked at me like my child's lungs were just another inconvenience. That sentence stayed with me. The prosecutor entered medical photos from Rhode Island Hospital taken at 2:23 a.m. Purple bruising along Maria's right hip where she had been thrown against the trunk edge, swelling in her damaged knee. Then came the repair estimate for the Corolla, $18,742.16. Insurance had not paid because Bianca's proof of coverage was expired, and the vehicle was tied to a shell company in Delaware called Bright Hollow Ventures. Maria explained what those 9 days without her car did to her family: 2 buses to work, extra babysitting costs, her neighbor's son driving Leo to treatment for $20 each way. Her checking account balance the morning after the crash was $86.19, and Bianca laughed. She actually laughed at that number, not loud, just enough for everyone to hear. I asked her, "Ms. Vale, what is funny?" She looked at me and said, "Nothing. I just find it amazing how poverty becomes a performance the second cameras are around. There were no cameras there, only pain. I have spent my life watching people reveal themselves when they think no one can stop them. So I asked her one question. Do you understand the harm alleged here?" She folded her arms and said, "I understand envy when I see it." That was the moment the case stopped being a traffic matter and started becoming a mirror. Because once a person tells you they believe suffering is envy, every cruel thing after that makes perfect sense. Then the prosecutor asked to admit social media evidence obtained through subpoena from Bianca's verified accounts. Her lawyer shot to his feet. Too late. The first image appeared on the screen. It was an Instagram story posted at 11:03 p.m. the same night. Bianca was leaning against the hood of the Lamborghini. In the lower corner of the frame, you could see Maria's smashed Corolla and the torn pharmacy bag near the curb. Across the image, in gold script, were the words, "When charity cases park too close to a masterpiece." There was a laughing emoji and a song playing over it. Nobody in that room moved. Then came a saved Snapchat clip from 11:06 p.m. Bianca's voice said, "I offered her cash and she still wants paperwork. These little town people are addicted to being victims." In the background, her assistant asked, "Should I call legal?" Bianca answered, "Call legal, call PR, call whoever makes poor people disappear from my night." Maria put her hand over her mouth. Officer O'Keefe stared straight ahead, but his jaw tightened. I have seen people hold themselves together in court with the strength of rope, but that kind of cruelty tests everybody. And then came the worst one. A TikTok draft saved to Bianca's cloud account at 12:14 a.m. She was in the back seat of the Lamborghini with 2 friends, sunglasses still on even at midnight, laughing. She looked into the camera and said, "Apparently some tiny city judge in Rhode Island is going to want me to stand up and act sorry because I dented a nurse's lunchbox on wheels. Watch me not." One of the men beside her laughed and asked, "What if the old guy gets mad?" Bianca tossed her hair and said, "Then maybe he can sentence me to fold napkins at Olive Garden." That was the moment even my bailiff looked down. I asked Bianca, "Is that your voice?" She said, "Deepfakes are getting very good." The prosecutor calmly introduced the metadata. Same device ID, same front camera, same geolocation, same account backup, same diamond phone case reflected in the window. The lie did not live very long after that. Bianca's lawyer whispered urgently into her ear, but she pulled away and looked straight at me with open contempt. Then she said the ugliest thing she had said all morning. "Let's be honest," she said. "This isn't about justice. This is class resentment. Men like you sit in old rooms like this and finally get to feel powerful over women like me. Self-made, rich, young, visible. You grew up around people who worked for families like mine, and now you want your revenge in a robe." The room broke into gasps. I let the silence sit for 1 second. Then I told her, "My father worked hard every day of his life and never confused money with worth. You are not being judged for being rich. You are being judged for acting poor in character." That landed, but the story still was not done, because in the corner of that TikTok video, visible for only a second, there was a black duffel bag on the back seat. It was half open. Inside were stacked deposit envelopes, a silver hard drive, and folders marked with the logo of Sterling Relief Initiative, Bianca's own charity for veterans and wounded families. The prosecutor asked for the frame to be enlarged. On one envelope, the printed routing slip was clear enough to read. That changed everything. The same shell company tied to the Lamborghini, Bright Hollow Ventures, was already listed in the expired registration record. Now it was showing up next to charity materials in a midnight video recorded hours after Bianca mocked a veteran nurse and tried to force a hush agreement on her. The prosecutor asked for a brief pause to speak with an investigator in the back row. I allowed it. He returned with a dark-suited woman beside him. She identified herself for the record as Special Agent Lena Ortiz, IRS Criminal Investigation, badge number 5531, working with a federal task force on financial fraud. The room got very still. She said certain materials in the admitted exhibits appeared directly connected to an active sealed investigation involving wire fraud, false charitable filings, witness intimidation, and shell company laundering tied to Sterling Relief Initiative. Now Bianca finally looked afraid, not annoyed, not insulted, afraid. Her lawyer stood and asked for immediate adjournment. Agent Ortiz calmly said, "That will not be necessary." 2 more agents appeared at the back door. No drama, no yelling, just certainty. That is what real consequences look like. They do not need to shout. The prosecutor then introduced one more recovered message from Bianca's private account, sent at 7:12 a.m. the morning after the crash to her assistant. It read, "Find the nurse's address. If she posts, bury her with legal. If she cries, make it look like extortion." Maria did not cry when she heard that. She sat very still, and somehow that was even more powerful. If you're still here, then you care about more than gossip. You care about justice. So stay with me now, and if this kind of story matters to you, be part of this with me, because what happened next is the part people still stop me on the street to talk about. Right then the clerk handed me a note. There was an incoming call asking to be heard on the record. Usually, I would not allow it. But Agent Ortiz quietly said, "You may want to hear this one." The caller identified himself as Charles Sterling, Bianca's father, chairman of Sterling Capital. His voice came through the speakerphone rough and tired. Not angry, tired. He confirmed his identity. I confirmed that Bianca was present. Then he said something his daughter clearly did not expect. "Your Honor, if my daughter broke the law, do not spare her because of my name. I have spent too many years paying for arrogance and calling it protection. I'm done." Bianca turned white. "Dad, hang up." But he kept going. "Bianca, I gave you money. I did not give you permission to become cruel. Sometimes the authority figure that matters most is not the judge, not the police, not the federal agent. Sometimes it is the first person who ever had a chance to teach you decency and failed to finish the job." I looked at Bianca. Her hands were shaking now. Her Cartier bracelet had slid down her wrist. Her phone kept buzzing on the table, but she would not touch it. The woman who refused to stand was now standing without being told. Funny how fast respect appears when power stops working. I gave her one last chance to speak. "Ms. Vale," I said, "this is your moment for truth." For a second I thought I might hear a real apology. Instead she whispered, "I didn't think it was a big deal." That was the heart of it, not just arrogance, scale. She believed harm becomes small when it happens to somebody with less money, so I sentenced her. On the city charges before me, I found her responsible on every count supported by the evidence and in direct contempt for her conduct in court. I imposed the maximum fines allowed. I ordered full restitution for Maria's car, medical care, broken medication, transportation costs, and lost wages. I suspended Bianca's driving privileges in Rhode Island for 2 years. And then I added something more. I ordered 1,000 hours of community service at the Providence VA Medical Center and a children's respiratory support program. Not public relations work, not donations work, real work. She would report in plain scrubs. No cameras, no personal assistant, no luxury car. No social media posts about growth or healing. She would wheel patients to appointments, restock respiratory carts, wipe down waiting room chairs, carry oxygen tanks, help veterans check in for treatment, spend time around parents who count every dollar before a prescription pickup. I also ordered the creation of a $200,000 scholarship fund in Maria Santos's name, paid from Bianca's personal assets, for nursing students who are veterans or single parents. Bianca tried to object. I stopped her. "You mocked sacrifice," I told her. "Now you will help fund it." That was when Agent Ortiz stepped forward, and informed Bianca she was being taken into federal custody on the sealed warrant. And then came the moment nobody expected. Bianca bent down, picked up one of the wet photographs of Maria's smashed Corolla from the evidence table, looked at Maria, and said in a tiny voice, "I'm sorry." Maria looked at her for a long time. Then Maria answered, calm and steady, "Be sorry with your life, not your mouth. I have heard thousands of sentences in court. Very few stay with me the way that one did." The agents led Bianca out. On the way in, the click of her red-soled heels sounded like status. On the way out, they sounded like consequence. Her assistant was crying. Her lawyer was already on the phone. Her watch still shined. Her bag was still expensive. None of it helped. Luxury can cushion a seat. It cannot cushion the truth. Maria stayed behind until the papers were signed. She thanked the clerk. She thanked Officer O'Keefe. She thanked me, though I told her she did not owe thanks for being seen. Before she left, I asked about Leo. For the first time that whole morning, she smiled. She said his numbers were better the night before. Then she picked up her folder, her old lunch bag, and walked out with more dignity than the billionaire who came in trying to tower over everyone. After the courtroom emptied, I sat there for a minute and thought about my father. I thought about all the people who come into court carrying bills, grief, fear, and hope in the same envelope. I thought about how easily money can rot into entitlement if no one ever says no, and I thought about Maria Santos, with $86.19 in her bank account, carrying herself with more grace than a woman with 12 million followers and a garage full of exotic cars. That is the lesson. Justice is not about hating wealth. It is not about cheering punishment just because someone is famous. Justice is about refusing to let money shrink the pain of other people. It is about making sure the veteran nurse, the single mother, the rich daughter, and the old judge all stand under the same truth. In my courtroom, I do not ask anyone to be perfect. I ask them to be honest. I ask them to remember that every file on my desk belongs to a real person with a real family and a real tomorrow waiting outside. If you forget that, no car is fast enough and no bank account is large enough to outrun what comes next. And if you remember nothing else from this story, remember this. The woman with the Hermes bag and the Lamborghini thought standing was beneath her. The woman in the cracked nursing shoes stood tall the entire time. That is how you tell who is truly rich. Thank you for staying with me through this one. If this story meant something to you, come back and walk into the next courtroom with me, because the next case I tell you might leave you just as stunned.